Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be talking about the box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the release of Death on the Nile, Marry Me, Blacklight, and also the second weekends of films like Jackass Forever, and also the Roland Emmerich film Moonfall. So there is a lot to talk about. There is, of course, let's just say there is another box office flop on the horizon based on these week 2 numbers. And also a bonus, we got some early numbers for the film Uncharted, which had a limited theatrical release in some international markets. So we'll talk a little bit about where that film currently stands compared to its budget, and also where some of the films like Death on the Nile stand in comparison to their budgets, even after their first week of release. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can tell from the Deadline headline, gotta love those rhymes. Death on the Nile charts 12.8 million domestically, where Marry Me, which is the new romance comedy, rom-com, featuring Owen Wilson and Jennifer Lopez. Yes, the pairing that everyone has been waiting for, the pairing that everyone has wished could happen one day in a rom-com. Owen Wilson, oh, wow, and Jennifer Lopez. Marry Me made $8 million while at the same time being released on Peacock as well for those with the premium tier. And that, of course, is typical of Valentine's Day weekend. Typically, there is some rom-com of some kind of another that gets released, as a lot of people just have it in their mind that they have to go see a romantic film during the Valentine's Day weekend or on Valentine's Day itself. I've personally never quite understood that, and luckily enough, Lady Freya feels the same way that I do when it comes to those types of things. As you can see there, it says it's the weekend where Hollywood pines for the female audience. Whether or not that is true or not, or whether or not it actually panned out that way, still remains to be seen. But we'll go ahead and dive into these numbers. As it says, Disney's COVID-delayed release of Kenneth Branagh's $90 million adaptation of Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile, starring Gal Gadot, is seeing a $5.1 million Friday, $12.8 million domestic opening, while Universal's $23 million budgeted Jennifer Lopez, Owen Wilson rom-com Marry Me, which is also available for the studio sister streaming service Peacock on their premium tier, landed third place with $3 million on Friday, with $3.6 on Saturday, for a total of $8 million projected for its weekend, coming out at over 3,000 theaters. So very interesting, to say the very least, as far as that release and the day and date model that Peacock is doing with some of their releases. Obviously, I expect that they think a lot of people are going to be staying in and staying home and wanting to just watch a rom-com, watch a romantic comedy. So maybe it was actually for the best for them to do so. The question for at least for me, is, okay, but how many people sign up for Peacock Premium just to see this movie? And that is ultimately what it comes down to, as far as whether a film has any sense of profitability or not, is, okay, you spent this much on the film, you marketed this film in this capacity, and how are you going to make that money back? And seeing that it's almost impossible to tell how many people sign up for or leave or stay a platform for any given specific reason, it's hard to, when you have these day and date models, day and date releases, really able to determine how much money a film at any given time is either making or losing because of it, and therefore all we have are the actual box office numbers themselves. As you can see, it's talking here about the differences between this and Murder on the Orient Express, which saw a much more impressive opening. As it says here, Branagh's previous Christie ensemble did truly surprise, crushing its projections and soaring to a $28.6 million opening and legging to $102.8 million by the end of the holidays. So again, much better domestic release for that film. This film has made so far, Death on the Nile, that is, has made about half of what that was, half of what the previous film has done. So not looking very good for it, especially when you look at that budget. And you also just keep in mind that unless it's got good word of mouth, unless it's got a lot of people excited to say, hey, this is worth seeing, I'm going to be seeing it tonight. So I'll let you all know once I put a review out on the channel whether I think it's worth seeing. But it's not looking very good based on those numbers. We do have, of course, a bit of international news as well, as Uncharted hits early offshore waters with $22 million. Whether or not that's successful or not, they're going to claim, well, it's pacing ahead of Black Widow and Shang-Chi and Eternals, which doesn't really say much of anything because it's not trending that much higher than them, like in the 15 to 20% range, trending higher than them in like-for-like markets around the same time in their release. But also, there is the big issue of the fact that 2 of those films were box office failures, or at least one is assuredly a box office failure in Eternals. Black Widow is very much up in the air because of the Disney Plus numbers and the lawsuit with and because of Scarlett Johansson. And then you had Shang-Chi, which made about $30 million in net gain profits. So again, really, I think not good films to compare a film, or for a film to be doing marginally better than other films in those markets, when especially the best film in the bunch there as far as box office, Eternals, did not have a very, not Eternals, definitely not Eternals. Rather, Shang-Chi did not have a very good international release, did not have a very good international showing. And so it's interesting to say the very least about what that film is likely to do based on these early numbers. It will be coming out this coming weekend. So I have my tickets to go see it on Thursday. So again, I'll be able to give my own personal thoughts of whether I think the film is good or not. And I'll be going in with a non-video game perspective because I am not a hardcore gamer. I did not grow up with the games or play a lot of the games. And so my thoughts on Nathan Drake are very limited. However, when you look at the images, it's no doubt in my mind that Nathan Fillion would have been a better pick for this, and that there is actually I believe it's a fan-made short film featuring Nathan Fillion in that role, and apparently it's really good, and it just shows why he should have been chosen instead of Tom Holland. Nothing against Tom Holland, but obviously some are going to speculate and say that Spider-Man No Way Home could potentially, send some people over their way, Uncharted's way, because of the Tom Holland connection. I just don't really necessarily think that there is a similar audience there, or that people who are fans of Tom Holland, specifically in Spider-Man, are going to be motivated to go see him just because he happens to be in another film. But speaking of Spider-Man No Way Home, it has topped $1.8 billion worldwide. So again, that question ultimately becomes, how much more does it go? Does it get up to $1.9 billion by the end of its run? Does it even get up to $2 billion without a China release? We'll have to, of course, wait and see. It is definitely slowing down a lot, and it is starting to see some competition from various films. And, of course, we are less than a month out, about 2 weeks or so out from the release of The Batman, which will be making the vast majority of its money when it gets released. And not a lot of the other films that are going to be out at the time are going to be really making much of anything. So, again, really, the time is running out on Spider-Man No Way Home to get to that and to squeeze past the $2 billion mark, if that is even possible at this point. $1.8 billion, though, definitely very impressive number for that to cross. Looking at the domestic openings, Death on the Nile opened $12.8 million at over 3,000 screens. Jackass Forever in its second weekend came in at number 2 with a 65% drop with $8 million in the bank. $37.4 million is its domestic run at this point. This film, which made money, became profitable after just one weekend of release. Once the foreign numbers came in, has now been able to make a small amount of profit, and is guaranteed to make even more profit as the film is indeed past the break-even point. Marry Me, on the other hand, despite its lower budget, and again, despite the fact that it came in at number 3 this weekend, $8 million, which was better than I thought. I thought that Spider-Man No Way Home was going to be able to somehow beat it. But apparently, Marry Me made $8 million. The Peacock premium release, though, obviously is going to be eating into that a bit. But the question, of course, is how much is it really eating into that? And it's really impossible for us to be able to tell. It is also one that is very much geared towards the Valentine's Day weekend. So with that going away next weekend and films like Uncharted coming out, I could see Marry Me just kind of falling in the downward part of the pack, dropping down to, the lower part of the top 10 for next weekend. And again, even with the $24 million production budget, going to be very difficult for that film to make its money back, I would argue, because of those reasons. We also had a new film from again, another action film in the Liam Neeson collection of random action films that he does in a given year. I feel like he has a contract where he has to do like 3 or 4 random action films in a given year. This film, Blacklight, from Briarcliff, made $3.6 million at over 2,700 screens, so not the widest of releases. $3.6 million, though. That film having a little bit of a bigger budget compared to Marry Me, not looking like it's in the best situation as far as making its money back, though. Again, there is a niche audience that loves Liam Neeson action films. Is it going to be enough without any other general audiences that can sometimes say, hey, what am I going to go see? Oh, this film has Liam Neeson in it. Okay, fine, I'll go see it. Since that crew really doesn't seem to be showing up in droves as in times past, it seems likely that Blacklight will probably not do that well. probably will do better on PVOD and probably will be on POVOD faster than some might expect. Sing 2 is that still that little engine that could make another $2.9 million, a 30% drop off from its previous week, so still making money for Universal there in its 8th week of release. Moonfall, on the other hand, dropped 71% in its 2nd week of release, another $2.8 million. This film is set to be one of the biggest box office flops of the year, which is kind of crazy to think about. We're only in February and we're still seeing some of the biggest box office flops for the year 2022 at this point in time. Kingsman didn't do all that much of anything. Again, still sticking around, but it's almost out of theaters. Licorice Pizza adding some more theaters because of its, I imagine, because of its Oscar nominations. So making another $922,000 there. So the fact that this film as an independent film is doing better than films like The 355, for instance, which is at the very bottom of this list. It was the number 9 spot last week and dropped all the way out of the list completely to not even be on the charts, really, making only $100,000. This film has been abandoned, and it's done. And it's hilarious to see. We also saw a special release of The Beatles Get Back, the rooftop concert. So obviously there was the 3-part docuseries on Disney Plus, and so part of that they decided to release it in IMAX, so in about 181 screens, and so that actually did pretty well when you look at the per theater number there, $2,276 per theater. So pretty good number there, showing even though it only made $402,000 for the number of theaters it was in. Actually looks pretty darn good. And actually, this is the 3rd week that they've had that in release. It has just, I think, been updated or has just not even been on my radar. West Side Story, even with some of the Oscar love it's been given, is actually still not making any money. And I don't know exactly what needs to be done and what needs to happen for people to finally wake up to that fact. So as I said, Uncharted technically already getting some release in the international marketplace, $21.5 million. But because we don't have an actual opening weekend for this film, we'll have to wait and see and try and take this number into account in a couple of weeks when we do our week 2 drop off, because of the fact it had an international kind of head start here. Death on the Nile made another $20.7 million worldwide, rather in the international market. So the entirety of its first opening weekend was 33.5, despite the fact it had a pretty good cast, maybe not as well known as the previous cast from their Murder on the Orient Express, but still 33.5, not very good on a $90 million budget for its opening. Jackass Forever on a $10 million budget, still doing quite well. Obviously, this is a domestic release, not going to do much internationally. $42.3 million worldwide. This film is looking to probably make about $30 to $40 million in net gain profit. Marry Me, again, featuring Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson, the couple that everyone wanted to see. Theaters and holiday Valentine's Day. Hey, if that's your thing, okay, enjoy it. Be the part of the $16.5 million in its international opening. Spider-Man No Way Home, again, crossing that $1.8 billion. Blacklight only really being an American release at this point as far as the numbers that we have, $3.6 million there. Not one of the better releases from Liam Neeson, but definitely not one of the worst. Sing 2, again, over $300 million in its entire box office, whereas Moonfall, oh man, $165 million budget film, 21.5 after 2 weeks makes this one of the biggest box office flops of the year. And let's go ahead and dive then into that charting just to show exactly how much of a flop it's going to be. So first, Jackass Forever, with $42.3 million worldwide in its 2nd week of release. I can project that the film will make somewhere between $60 and $84 million in total by the end of its run because of a $10 million production budget. The break-even number for that film was $25 million, meaning that we can take the net gross to be somewhere between $21 and $35 million. At this point, it is sitting around $10.3 million in net gain profit. So doing, again, quite well. It's not going to be the biggest release. It's not going to be the best performing based on budget compared to budget release of all time. But hey, it's making money, which is more to be said for a lot of other films that have come out this year and last couple years, and especially compared to the second film to talk about. So we also have our second weekend numbers for Moonfall from Roland Emmerich. This one at $21.5 million internationally. It makes this film likely to make somewhere between $30 and $43 million in total by the end of its run. So internationally, that is what I project it to make, unless it gets released in a random country that it was not first expected to be released in or has been waiting to be released in, and there's a lot of people that just really want to see a Roland Emmerich sci-fi disaster film. Again, Okay, maybe some people are out there that want to see it, but with a $146 million budget, it meant that the break even for it was $365 million. And with those week 2 numbers, I am projecting the film will lose somewhere between $200 and $193 million. So best case scenario, it only loses $193 million versus worst case scenario where it loses $200 million. With the number it is at right now, 21.5, it is at $206 million as a net loss for it. So not looking very good for Moonfall or for Roland Emmerich. As you can see, Uncharted, it's still hard to tell whether or not that film will make any money, again, because we are still waiting on the actual official wide opening, the wide release date for that movie. Right now, it's sitting at $167.1 million in losses, but that will probably go down quite a bit next weekend after its opening, despite the fact the opening is not expected to be that large domestically. Death on the Nile, after its opening, is at $114.9 million in losses, because we know that that film is going to definitely drop next weekend and is not doing a whole lot internationally. Makes me suspect that that film will probably be a $50 million or so loss by the end of its run. So who knows if we're going to see more Kenneth Branagh Poirot films. Some people, like The Empress of the Universe and Laura and others who have been fans of other iterations of Poirot, are probably happy to hear that bit of news. But not looking good for Death on the Nile, the second in the Hercule Poirot series by Kenneth Branagh. Marry Me, $16.5 million because of a much smaller budget. Still, again, likely to end in a loss, because after this weekend, who is really going to want to go see Marry Me, as it's kind of made for this weekend? We'll have to wait and see. Blacklight, because that film was made for around $40 or so million. Break even is closer to around 80 or so. That means that because of its $3.6 million number, $62.3 million in losses at this point in time. So we'll have official estimates on those films, on those 4 films, or rather on those 3 films. Uncharted, we'll have to wait still an extra week on that. But on those other 3 films, we'll be able to make some projections after those numbers come in. And actually, Blacklight, closer to, because of the total cost of marketing being 64.5, budget $43 million. The actual break even for it is $107 million worldwide, which is not likely going to happen. But what are your thoughts? We have some other films, obviously, that some have been tracking. So Scream 5 pretty much is at the end of its making money. So it's going to end in the 30s, maybe going into the low 40s. So, hey, it made a little bit of money, but was it enough to make up for the deal that the studio made to gain access to the rights? Who knows? 355 will end definitely somewhere around $100 million in financial losses. Kingsman still looking at a massive loss. Matrix Resurrections the same. Sing 2 up to $58.7 million in net gain profit. No one, I think, ever saw that coming. Spider-Man No Way Home up to $782.4 in net gain profit as well. West Side Story, despite the fact that it has received Oscar nominations, doesn't mean a damn thing, because it's still over $100 million in losses. And even though it has performed comparatively better compared to its second week of release, with 43% of the second week, basically the 2 weeks in numbers being 43% of its entirety, the entirety of the film, which is relatively and usually a strong thing because of its massive budget, is not going to do this film any favors. No extra money yet for Ghostbusters Afterlife that I have seen, but this film was indeed able to pass into the profitability territory. So anyway, let me know your thoughts about any of these films. Do you think that Death on the Nile will be able to turn it around and do well and make money? I just... Based on the current loss and what it's made and where it's released, I just don't think that's going to happen. Also, what are your thoughts about Moonfall being a financial disaster? Again, not a lot there really to have any sense of positive vibes or positive thoughts towards. So let me know your thoughts about that. And also, do you think Uncharted will be able to make up for its financial losses when it gets a wide release next weekend? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, make sure that you head over to my website, ombreviews.com. Go over and hover over the Raven Awards banner and go down to Raven Awards 2021 and vote for the 4th annual Wednesday Raven Awards, where we boycott the Oscars by having the people, having the Asgardian people vote on the best and the worst of the year 2021. And some people have already gotten triggered by that. We've already had a bunch of elitist snobs come in and saying, well, the Oscars are just so much better because they actually reward the films that are the best. Sure. Anyway, there is a form right here. You can click on this link and it'll open you up to your ballot, and you can fill that out. And you can also edit it after if you make any mistakes or change your mind. But get those in while you can. There's about a month left or so of voting on that, as we will close that a couple days before the Oscars, because we will have our Wednesday Raven Award stream trying to go up as much as possible and as long as possible up against the Oscars as a true boycott of it. So make sure you get your votes in as soon as you can. Anyway, let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, slap that fire button on Odyssey. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my Patreon Subscribestar and Locals members, starting off with Patreon animation commentator Brandon, let's go Brandon, Brian P, Christopher Bowman, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father. Father Damian Cook, Fuzz Aldrin, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Hymir Ari Hymason, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, The Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ellen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, or Miss Martin Muses, Theodore Benden, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. Also to my Subscribestar peeps, UAB Mad Dog, which is Mr. Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stand 4, John B, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on the Subscribestar platform. And to my 3 local supporters, we got Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, which is once again Mike Jackson, super supporter over there, and Robert Barnes. Thank you very much for supporting me over on the Locals platform. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, please think about signing up on either of those platforms. You can find a link in the description below that will lead you to all of those different pages. It is known as the Willow link, as it is w.lo link, and it will have all the links to that, to the Discord channel, to all different kinds of places, including places to support me as well. At the Citizen of Asgardian level, you get Citizen of Asgardian level is how it's labeled on Patreon. Still need to fix that, but at Citizen of Asgard level, you get a shout out at the end of every live stream and video. If you join at the Army of Asgard level, you also access to a giveaways channel, which is featured on the Discord that I have. I know, River, it is very exciting. It is so exciting, where you get giveaways for things like 4K titles, Steelbook titles, etc. Again, I got some 4K Steelbooks of The Punisher, for instance. I've got 4Ks of tons of other movies, so I'm giving those away all the time. So if that sounds interesting to you, join the Army of Asgard level. Also, at the Keep of the Bifrost level, you get all of that stuff, plus you get access to a once a month and maybe twice a month. We're trying to add an extra podcast in there of me and John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where we talk about movies, and also you get to ask your questions. Any questions that you want to ask, you get to ask with that podcast. And then you have the Chosen of Valhalla level, which gives you access to all of those, and also a once a month podcast where you get to be featured with me on the main channel. We all get to talk together about movies, culture, pop culture, anything really that the Chosen want to talk about, or anything the Chosen want to promote is on the table. So if you like that, join at the Chosen of Valhalla level. Also, during your first month of support, you get a free t-shirt. Any t-shirt that you want from the main store, you get access to, and I do ship internationally anywhere in the world. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.